Every war in the last 100 years was fought over one of 5 words. Every election, every revolution, every time a government collapsed, or a dictator rose, or a country fell apart. 5 words. Democracy, socialism, fascism, populism, authoritarianism. Most people use at least one of these words every week. Most people could not give a clean definition of any of them. And the gap between how often these words are used and how little most people actually understand them is exactly how politicians get away with this so much. Because when you don't understand the words, you cannot see what is being done to you with them. Democracy is the oldest one on this list and the most misunderstood. It comes from ancient Greece. Demos mean the people, Cartus mean the power, so the word mean people power. Athens in roughly 500 BC was doing something no society had seriously attempted before, letting ordinary male citizens vote on laws directly, not through representatives, not through kings. They showed up, they debated, they voted. The majority decided. It lasted about 200 years before collapsing. The version most countries use today is not that. It is a representative democracy. You vote for someone who then votes on your behalf. You don't write the laws. You choose who does. There is an important distinction there that tends to get lost. The United States of America has not held a direct vote on a major law since its founding. What it has is election, which is not the same thing as democracy in the original sense. It is a system designed to prevent power democracy, because the founders were worried about what majorities of ordinary people might decide if left unchecked. The most interesting thing about democracy is what happens to it under pressure. In 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany through a democratic election. He won 33% of the vote in a coalition, was appointed chancellor legally, and then used democratic mechanisms, emergency powers, and parliamentary votes to dismantle the democracy that put him there. Democracy did not stop him. Democracy was the door he walked through. This is not an argument against democracy. It is an argument for understanding that democracy is a set of institutions and norms, and that those institutions can be hollowed out while the name stays on the door. Socialism is the most argued about word on this list because it covers an enormous range of things that have almost nothing in common. At its core, socialism is the idea that the economy should be organized for collective benefit rather than a private profit. That the resources of a society, the land, the factories, the hospitals, the schools should be owned or heavily managed by the state or the community rather than private individuals. But that one core idea has produced widely different outcomes depending on how it was applied. The Soviet Union called itself socialist. It collectivized farms, banned private businesses, and built a state that owned everything. The result, an economy that could launch satellites and build nuclear weapons but could not reliably stock its own supermarkets. By the 1980s, the USSR was importing grain from the United States to feed its own people. Sweden also called itself socialist, or at least social democratic, which is a softer version of the same core idea. It has a free healthcare, free university education, one of the strongest social safety nets on earth. It also has private businesses, stock markets, and billionaires. Both claim the same word. The honest version of this debate is not socialism versus capitalism. It is a question of degree how much of the economy should be collectively managed and how much should be left to markets. Every developed country on earth does both. The argument is about the ratio. The countries that tried to do 100% socialism, where the state owned and controlled everything, found the same thing every time. The people at the top of the state ended up with all the power. And power without accountability looks a lot the thing socialism was supposed to replace. Fascism is the word people use most and define least. It comes from the Italian word fascico, a bundle of rods tied together. The idea being that individual rods break easily. Bound together, they cannot be broken. Strength through unity, unity enforced by the state. Mussolini invented the word as a political label in Italy in 1990. He described fascism as the merger of corporate and state power under a strong nationalist leader. The economy stays private, but it answers to the state. The press stays nominally free, but it prints what the state wants. Election happen, but the outcome is not really in doubt. Hitler took those ideas and added radical ideology on top of them. National Socialism, Nazism was fascism, with a biological theory of who deserved to belong to the nation and who did not. Both versions share the same core features. A single dominant leader presented is the embodiment of the nation. Extreme nationalism, suppression of opposition, glorification of the military, contempt for democratic deliberation as weak and slow. The idea that the nation faces an existential threat from enemies, internal and external. They justify emergency measures. The reason this word matters in 2026 is not because fascism as it existed in the 1930s has returned. It has not. It matters because the individual components of it, the strong man leader, the internal enemy, the contempt for institution, the nationalism, the emergency powers, those components are visible in the governments right now on multiple continents. Whether that adds up to fascism, that is a serious debate among serious historians. What is not debatable is that the ingredients are present in the ways they were not 20 years ago. Populism is the trickiest word on this list because it is not really an ideology, it is a style. The core of populism is one claim. There is a corrupt elite running things, and there is a power ordinary people who have been betrayed by that elite. And the populist leader represents the people against the elite. That structure can be filled with almost any content. Bernie Sanders is called a populist. He says the corrupt elite are the Wall Street billionaires and the people are the working class. Hugo Chavez in Venezuela said the elite were the American-backed oligarchs and the people were the poor. Nigel Farage said the elite were unelected EU bureaucrats and the people were ordinary British workers. Viktor Orban in Hungary says the elite are George Soros and liberal NGOs, and the people are the Hungarian nation. Completely different enemies, completely different definitions of who counts as the people. Same rhetorical structure. Populism is dangerous not because its complaints are always wrong. Sometimes the elite really is corrupt, and the ordinary people really are being ignored. It is dangerous because of what it does to institutions. Populist leaders tend to argue that because they represent the real people, any institution that challenges them is by definition corrupt and anti-democratic. Courts that rule against them are activist judges. A free press that criticizes them is fake news. Opposition parties that win votes are fraudulent. An electoral result they lose was rigged. That logic where any check on the leader's power is reframed as a conspiracy against the people is how democracies get hollowed out while still holding elections. It happened in Venezuela. It happened in Hungary. Researchers who study democratic backsliding say it is the most common pattern of democratic collapse in the 21st century. Authoritarianism is the end of the road that the other words sometimes lead to. An authoritarian government is one that concentrates power in a single leader or a small group, limits or eliminates political opposition, controls the media, suppresses civil society, and maintains control through a combination of force and loyalty rather than the genuine public consent. Today, over half of the world's population live under some of authoritarian government. China, Russia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, North Korea, Belarus, Egypt. These are not marginal countries. Between them, they contain billions of people and control enormous amount of world's resources, military capacity, and geopolitical influence. The thing that surprised most people about authoritarianism when you look at it up close is how rarely it involves constant visible repression. North Korea is the extreme version. Constant surveillance, total control, extreme poverty for most while the regime lives well. But most authoritarian governments do not look like North Korea. Russia has a private businesses, social media, restaurants, concerts, a middle class with iPhones. The repression is selective. It targets people who organize opposition, who threaten the leadership, who speak too loudly in the wrong direction. Most people, most of the time, are left alone. The selective repression is actually more stable than the control, because most people under most authoritarian government are not being actively oppressed. They are just being watched. And being watched is enough to make the most people cautious. And cautious is enough to keep most authoritarian government in power for a very long time. The Freedom House organization tracks political freedom globally. In 2024, it recorded the 18th consecutive year of global democratic decline for 18 years in a row. More countries moved toward authoritarianism than moved away from it. 18 years, that is not a blip, that is a direction. Democracy, socialism, fascism, populism, and authoritarianism, these are not just history lesson words. They are operating system of the world right now today. Venezuela calls itself a socialist democracy. Its citizens have been fleeing by the millions for a decade. 7 million people have left a country for 30 millions because of the economy collapsed under a government that claimed to be governing in the people's name. 18 consecutive years of global democratic decline. That is the trend, not the exception. The trend. The reason any of this matters, the reason understanding these 5 words is worth your time, is not academic. It is because these words are being used on you right now, in the news you read, and the speeches politicians give, in the way government describe what they are doing and why. When you know what the words actually mean, you can see through the way they are being misused. And the people using them to mislead you are counting on the fact that most people cannot.